So Professor Mike Robinson is an engaged network co-investigator, and he is Professor of Cultural Heritage at the University of Nottingham and visiting professor, University of Birmingham, sorry, and visiting professor at Nottingham Trent University. Professor Mike Robinson is Professor of Cultural Heritage at the University of Birmingham for over 25 years. Mike's work has focused upon the relations between heritage, tourism, culture, and he has published numerous books, articles, and chapters on the various ways in which these realms intersect. Recent works have addressed issues relating to world heritage and tourism, heritage and popular culture, the concept of tradition and heritage, and super diversity. Mike is a founding a member of the UNESCO UNITWEN network on tourism, culture, and development, specialist advisor to the UNESCO World Heritage Programme in Sustainable Tourism and to the UK's National Commission for UNESCO. He was a government-appointed member of the UK expert panel to determine the UK's tentative list for World Heritage and is the co-author of a major UNESCO report on tourism, heritage, and sustainable development. He has worked on projects with UNESCO offices in China, Peru, Southeast Asia, and with World Heritage sites in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Canada, Sweden, Finland, and many other parts of the world. He has led grants from the British Academy, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, where he is a member of the Peer Review College, US Social Science Research Council, and several other national-based funding bodies. The list goes on, Mike. So I will stop here, but I can see a lot of UNESCO there in the resume. So we'll be interested to hear more from you. So the stage is yours, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much, Gamal, and good morning, everybody. And it is my great pleasure here to be a part of this important project, Engage, and part of this network conference. And it really has been a very wonderful past 2 years of seeing all of these wonderful cases and really talented researchers coming up through the surface, I think, to showcase what we really mean by humanitarian heritage. And I only have 20 minutes or perhaps a little bit less. So I'd like to highlight some of the topics and some of the themes which I know will be addressed over over the next 3 days. And I want to start with a reflection, because when I'm asked, and I've been asked on several occasions now, as I'm sure you have, Gamal, and others involved in the project, when I've been asked about the Engage project and what it is and what it does, I've always responded by saying, well, it's a way of reimagining the heritage of the world. And when I say this, I invoke this in counterpoint to the concept of world heritage as enshrined in the 1972 convention, which I've worked with for a long time. But as we have to remind ourselves, next year, the convention will be 50 years old, and lots of things have changed within 50 years. Time has moved on, generations have come and gone. So I think it's the right time for the Engage project. And I think that's borne out by the sort of snowballing effect of all of these projects which we can identify. And later on, I just want to identify a couple more outside of the regions where we are focusing upon, just to make that point. This is a real sort of, this has got real momentum to it. Now, back in 1972, it was true to say that the World Heritage Convention was a paragon of what I would call optimistic humanism. You know, born out of the tragedy of the 20th century, of the former part of the 20th century. And what was interesting, and what is interesting about the discourse of UNESCO and the wider United Nations framework, of course, is this notion of a common humanity. But this idea of humanity, in a sense, has not really unfolded. And you know, as somebody once said, the biggest critique of the United Nations and UNESCO is that we're still having wars and conflict around the world, which does say something about what's been happening. Nevertheless, this category remains in place, and it has many flaws, and I'm aware of those many flaws, and it can't be disinvented. Nobody is going to disinvent this notion, this concept of World Heritage. There are too many things at stake in this. But at the same time, what we have to recognize is that there are other modalities of heritage which are being produced, and also this notion of the relationship between heritage and humanity and humanitarianism is being actively redefined, and has been done so for quite a number of years now. So I want to share with you some sort of reflections and questions, maybe just to sort of to get everybody to have in their mind over the next few days. And any question about heritage, what we value, and heritage is about what we value in our lives, what we protect, what we fund, which is important, and by consequence, what we don't fund. These are moral questions. These are meaningful questions. These are not just sort of, you know, questions of administration. These are moral questions. Also, and again, we're all aware of this, hierarchies of heritage exist in all societies and are enshrined in public policy. So you will know what your national criteria is for designating sites of special heritage. And above all, in a sense, sits this UNESCO system, this World Heritage system, that again state parties willingly and quite rationally buy into. But this dominant heritage paradigm, which Laura Jane Smith talks about as the Authorized Heritage Discourse, well, it has privileged what I would call the highly visible types of heritage. It's the 1,100 and odd World Heritage sites that we know of. It privileges aesthetics, or it privileges particular aesthetic frameworks and sensibilities, which can be traced right the way back to the European Enlightenment. It privileges the elite. It privileges the expert. And one of the things, if anybody introduces me and says that I'm an expert on heritage, I feel rather embarrassed at that, because I'm not really an expert on heritage. I don't think anybody's an expert on heritage. We're just experienced in our lives. It certainly privileges nationalist agendas, and that's been that's very raw issue at the moment, and we will see this unfolding in a few weeks' time when the next the postponed World Heritage Committee meets in Fuzhou in China, and we know what the politics behind UNESCO is on this. It privileges difference. And that's always been an issue. It's one of these great tensions between difference and commonality. It certainly privileges the developed world, and we can see this by just looking at a map of where the World Heritage sites are located, and it also privileges the tangible. And of course, we have been overtaken by this notion, quite rightly, in the sense of recognizing that there is more to heritage than the tangible. There's a great universe of intangibility around this. So the questions I always ask are, where are the communities and the decision-making processes that are involved with heritage? And I have to say, and again, this is not news in a sense, but you know, it took UNESCO 33 years to recognize that communities should be part of the process. You know, the so-called fifth C of the strategic objectives of UNESCO only came into being in 2005. And I thought that's always been rather telling. And also we asked the question, heritage for what and heritage for who? And these are really central questions. Now, again, you know that World Heritage is predicated on identifying this notion of outstanding universal value. And from a philosophical point of view, this is incredibly contentious. But nevertheless, it's a subjective judgment. It is really a subjective judgment, and we can't pretend otherwise. But it's interesting to remind ourselves of, again, this notion of humanity. UNESCO means by when it uses the term humanity, and OUV, outstanding universal values, defined as to be so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and be of common importance for present and future generations of all humanity. And the sad thing is it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that at all. It doesn't recognize cultural differences. It hasn't recognized different levels of development. And so this notion of common humanity, which was a wonderful, enlightened and ambitious concept back in the beginning of the 1970s, hasn't lived up to this. So as this is going on, as I say, we can't disinvest ourselves from what's happening in real politics with UNESCO, but there is nevertheless, a transformation taking place, almost under the radar of the ways in which heritage is being produced and mobilized, and in ways which is focusing upon what is relevant. Relevant is a really important word here, and what is meaningful, what can be shared through the human condition. So this is leading to new modalities of engagement. It's creating new producers and consumers of heritage, and we have to think about the consumption of heritage here as well. And again, new questions are being generated, and new questions are being asked, particularly by the newer generations who are aware of the changes that have taken place in society as they relate to climate change, or as they relate to issues relating to global poverty, or any of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals which have been identified by the United Nations. So the questions that I think are apparent, and I'm pleased to say are almost sort of embedded within this project and the Engage project and the humanitarian hubs, is how can we better use heritage to improve the condition of humanity? Now, using heritage used to be a sort of a very vulgar phrase to some people, as though heritage has this intrinsic value which is untouchable almost once you put a sign on it saying that it's valuable. But heritage has always been used for various reasons, for social, economic, political reasons. So how can we use it to genuinely improve the condition of humanity, rather than put a fence around it and sit and look at it? How can we better learn from heritage? And we don't seem to learn from heritage. Heritage is not history. Heritage is within the present. And as I say, there's no future in history. We need to look at what's on the ground. Heritage is the key, is a gateway to the past. But it's something which really needs to be embedded in our present. And again, what new heritage forms are being generated, and why are they being generated? We have to look at those those conditions, those drivers which generate new heritage forms. And just to show, as I say, I know the hubs are located in North Africa, Middle East, and India, etc. But just to give just to show some examples of how this theme is global and how it is building up, I just want to sort of pick out a couple of these and share them with you. And one is one of the most amazing museums you would ever visit. This is the Favela Museum in Rio. Now, Rio has the actual city, not the wider conurbation. Rio has a population of about 6.7 million people. Approximately 1.4 million live in favelas. It's wrong to call them shanty towns. These are established 100 years ago. And of course we look at them in a rather despairing way, I think. But the museum, and there's more than one museum. This is the Favela Museum in Rio. There's a Favela Museum in Sao Paulo and other parts of Brazil. This museum has a lot of stories. It's not about objects. And again, one of the moves away from this sort of this authorized discourse heritage is we've got to get away from this fetish that we've had in Europe for the past 300, well, since the Renaissance, this fetish of the object, of the built thing, you know. This heritage deals with stories. And this museum has stories to share with the rest of humanity. And what it tries to do is it tries to say, this isn't just about poverty. It isn't just about inequality, but it's also about common human values of resilience, immense creativity, immense enterprise. And one of the officials of the museum, when asked, well, so how many curators have you got? And she said thousands, because the people of the favelas have a role in this. They have a stake in this site, in this museum. And I think that's just what we really need to be looking at, because this is a piece of heritage which is making a difference. And bear in mind, this is political. Of course, it's political. It's making a point, and that's what needs to happen. And it's given voice to communities which previously were excluded, on the margins, over the borders, all of the things that we talk about within the Engage project. Another incredible project many years ago, tangentially involved in this project, in a small community on Vancouver Island in Canada, in Victoria Province, where a tiny community which had been sort of, but not untypical, had its forestry industry taken away from it, basically, and was dying. And so what it did was it decided to record its story through the artistry of its population, and particularly its First Nations population. And so you have this incredible these incredible images and murals all around the town. Every part of the town is painted with the story, and now it's become a very successful tourist destination, and everybody has a role to play in here. And again, this is not monumental heritage. This is just storytelling. So this is part of this rapidly growing number of community-centered initiatives, which I think are defining and or redefining their own heritage, but also using it in different ways to bring very direct benefits to the local community and through tourism and visitor spend, and again, lots of local ingenuity. This has been happening in this very previously hick town of on the margins. And another example there, which again is one of my favorite examples of monumental heritage, but a different type of monumental heritage. It is these giant cooling towers of a former power station in Soweto in South Africa. And you will know of Soweto and the political resonance of Soweto in South African politics. And instead of pulling this down, these have been these cooling towers have been transformed by a coat of paint. Paint goes a long way in telling stories. Again, it's a heritage which is there because the local people wanted it to be. This was part of their community. This is what they had grown up with. This was a familiarity, a sense of belonging. And now, and you can just see on this image, a little rope bridge which connects the two is being transformed into an adventure center. So you have these wonderful sort of markers of the past being used in the present for the local community, and particularly the youth. I will, I know I need to bring this to a close, so I will do this, because before I put up an image, where was it, of the Taj Mahal, one of the most iconic World Heritage sites, and as you know, the mausoleum for Shah Jahan's favorite wife, and just in counterpoint to this, and again, I think generally in counterpoint and illustrative of how heritage is being created from different perspectives here, I cite this, and this is one of my favorite heritage stories ever, because this is a vernacular constructed Taj Mahal by a retired postmaster from Uttar Pradesh, Western Uttar Pradesh, Fazil Hassan Qadri. And you just see the little inset there. His wife died of cancer back in 2011. And they had been married for 30 odd years. And so he decided to build his own monumental shrine, raise the money, and this has become an attraction. This has become, for me, I have more in common. This is more relevant to me than the Taj Mahal can ever be. This is a really human story. You know, sadly, the guy was, a few years ago, was knocked down and killed by a car. A really tragic story. But the memory and his ambition and the real emotion that goes in, which we can all identify with, I think is here in this, and this has been criticised by the officials as well, which actually makes it better for me. This is really what we mean by humanitarian heritage, heritage which actually comes from the very spring of humanity. So look, I'm out of time here. I think there is so much more to explore with all of this upwelling of humanitarian heritage and community initiatives around the world, and I really sort of would like to see more engagement from other parts of the world in this, contributing to realize how much we do share when we start sort of looking at heritage in a much more sort of vernacular and human way, humanistic way, rather than this top-down impositions that we seem to have bought into over the years. So I will end there, and I will listen with interest at the cases over the next few days. Thank you very much indeed.